What's up, guys? Hello, Football Talk here. We have reached the final week of the 2021 NFL season, which usually at this point the playoff seeding is already final, but after seeing several additional teams, especially in the AFC, get eliminated, 7 teams are still fighting for the final 3 playoff spots, along with a lot of shifting between division winners, so there's a lot going on, and I thought it would make sense to go through all the implications, along with predicting all the games, and present to you how I think the ultimate playoff picture will look like. So let's dive into it. And I have to thank playoffpredictors.com here for this, to help me with figuring out how some of these tiebreakers come into play, with differences between 2- and 3-way ties, and all that kind of stuff. So let's start with what we already know. First on the left side here in the AFC, the Bengals have already won the North, the Titans have clinched the South, the East is still up for grabs between the Bills and the Patriots, and Buffalo is the upper hand there, and then finally, the Chiefs once again are champs of the West. While on the NFC side, the Packers have already clinched home field advantage throughout the playoffs, with the Bucs already having clinched the South. Cowboys are champs of the East, and the Rams and the Cardinals are still figuring out who will get the division crown and who will end up being a wildcard. But we'll see those 49ers down here lurking as well. Back to the AFC side, the one division to still be decided is the East, of course, where the Bills have to take care of business to make sure they get to play host in the wildcard round, while the Patriots would have a chance to take the crown away from them if those guys were to lose, and New England were to get revenge for a game that they probably should have won the season opener against Miami. Yet, funnily enough, it's the Patriots along with the Titans, Chiefs and Bengals as the 4 teams still eligible for the number 1 seed, because if they won the East, they'd have the tiebreaker for the best conference record if all those teams would end up at 11-6. The Titans have head-to-head tiebreakers over the Chiefs and Bills, while the Bengals also now own it head-to-head over Kansas City. The Chiefs are the ones who would actually need to finish with the top record at 12-5 to earn home field advantage throughout the playoffs, since they've lost to the 3 other current division leaders. And then the wildcard race is even more intriguing, because right now it's the Colts and the Chargers, as you can see here, with those 6 and 7 seeds. But the Raiders, Ravens and Steelers are all also still alive. Obviously, if all teams in question were to win or lose, everything would stay the same. But other than that, it can get quite complicated. The Steelers are the easiest one to determine here, with the tie on the resume, where they need to beat the Ravens, have the Colts lose, and not have a tie between the Chargers and Raiders, who they both lost to. Colts are also fairly simple, they win and they're in, because the only other way that I'm aware of that they could get in would be a tie between the Steelers and Ravens, and the Chargers and Raiders not to end in a tie. The Ravens have just a 3% chance of still sneaking in, which starts with them beating Pittsburgh at home, the Colts losing at Jacksonville, and the Raiders winning that final game of the regular season against the Chargers, because then they'd have the head-to-head sweep over Indy and LA. And then of course that Sunday night matchup between Chargers and Raiders, where most likely the winner of this one will qualify and the loser will be out of it. Although there's a really weird scenario where if the Jaguars were to beat the Colts, both these teams could actually still qualify with a tie, the kind of gentleman's agreement where they could both get in, just to add another potential twist to this whole thing. Actually, let me switch here to week 18. I don't know why I chose week 17 first. But either way, let's switch over to the NFC side. The top is much clearer, I would say, since the Packers have already clinched that top seed. Even though seeds 2 through 4 could still get very interesting, since the Rams won the direct matchup against the Bucs. The Bucs have the head-to-head tiebreaker over Dallas from the season kickoff game, but the Cowboys actually have the tiebreaker over the Rams, since the win would actually tie them for the best in-conference record, along with the Packers at 10-2. Now what you have to add to all of this is the fact that the Cardinals still have a chance to win the West, take care of business against the Seahawks, and the Rams will continue to struggle against San Francisco, which we've seen the last few years, because both would be 12-5, and the Cardinals would own a 5-1 divisional record. And if all these teams ahead of them currently, not including the Packers of course, would lose, they could actually jump all the way up to that number 2 seed. Either way, that 5th seed belongs to whoever doesn't win the West, while the 49ers and Saints will determine the final playoff berth in the conference, depending on who can win the season finale, while the 49ers of course are a game up on them. The real winners here can only be the Eagles, who have already clinched a ticket to the postseason, thanks to that head-to-head against New Orleans, but they could still move up to number 6 if they were to win the final NFC East battle against the Cowboys, and the Niners lose regardless of what happens with the Saints. Got it? Alright, I know this was still a little bit confusing, but in the end, what really matters is that seeds number 1 through 5 are still not determined in the AFC. There can still be a lot of shuffling going around, while it's 2 through 5 in the NFC, with the AFC East and NFC West still up for grabs, and both those groups in the 5 spot currently having a chance to rise all the way up to number 1 or 2 respectively. In the AFC, you have the Colts, Chargers, Raiders, Steelers, and Ravens fighting for those 6 and 7 seeds, while the 49ers could secure the 6th seed with a win, and the Saints could still grab that final spot in the NFC if San Francisco were to lose and they took care of business against Atlanta. Now let's run through all these games, pick winners, and see who gets in according to my predictions. And we'll try to go somewhat chronologically with the Saturday games first here, where we have the Chiefs at the Broncos, where Kansas City will try to keep the hopes for the number 1 seed in the AFC still alive against a Denver team that could not make the plays necessary in big moments in the last few games. But Vic Fangio might be playing for his job here, so I think they'll put up a fight, but ultimately with Kansas City still having something to play for, unless they decide to rest anybody, I think this is going to be the game that they want to win and put themselves into the best position going forward. And then the second game on Saturday is the Cowboys at the Eagles, which that NFC East matchup where both are playoff bound and don't have a ton to play for, but the Philly crowd should be rowdy for this one. And without knowing who will win on Sunday, the Cowboys still have a chance to put themselves into a really good position, possibly to move up all the way to that number 2 seed. So once again, unless they decide that it's not really worth it, if they can't get home field advantage, I think the Cowboys take care of business here. And let me just quickly tell you what the 425 games are. So we have the 49ers and the Rams, the Panthers at the Bucks, the Seahawks at the Cardinals, Patriots at Dolphins, Saints at Falcons, and Jets at Bills. So the AFC East and NFC West will be decided in this window, and so will the final playoff team in the NFC. And the Bucks also can't look at who wins the West first before they get onto the field and decide if this game really means much for them. So let's quickly run through these games on Sunday. First up with the Bengals at the Browns, AFC North battle. This really will come down to if they decide to rest Joe Burrow. In this case, with the Chiefs winning on Saturday, their chances of earning that number 1 seed in the AFC would be gone. So really not that much to play for. Really just seeding between 2 and 4 that they could move around. What have the Browns really shown me recently to believe in them? But considering that Burrow will likely be resting in this spot, and they have something to play for because Baker Mayfield kind of playing for his job here as well as the Browns quarterback. Some really good talent on the roster still, and they are capable of doing stuff. Just the offense has been so inconsistent. I'd like to pick the Bengals here anyway, because there's going to be some solid players still out there. But with the defensive line of the Browns being able to take this game over if everybody's out there, I think they win this one, rather meaningless game, and the Bengals will be content with being the 4 seed most likely in the spot. Then with the Colts at the Jaguars, which could be a very meaningful game. The Colts have actually struggled to win at Jacksonville. I think they haven't done so since 2014. And these games always are somewhat dangerous, where one team can spoil it for a division rival. But the Jaguars probably the worst team in the league, along with the Giants. I think the Colts, much better coaching staff, better talent on the field, and I think they take care of business here to secure themselves a spot. After they kind of let us down against the Raiders last week, when I thought they would already clinch their ticket. Then we have another AFC North battle between the Steelers at the Ravens. Again, both teams still alive and fighting for the final playoff berth. Since this runs parallel to the Colts game, didn't really know what was going on. Once again, this will come down to which quarterback will we see out there for Baltimore. Will it be Lamar Jackson or Tyler Huntley? Both have certainly proven to be capable. Both these teams are desperate in the spot. Ravens have now lost 5 in a row, I believe, and all but won by the skin of their teeth. Against the division rival, with the Steelers winning that first one, where it really felt like the Ravens were in control for most of the game and could have won that late 2-point conversion. I think they split the season series, and the Ravens would keep themselves alive if not for the Colts winning already, which I just pictured here. Then we go over to the AFC South, where with the Titans, with a chance to secure that number 1 seed against the Texans. The Houston regime would certainly love to build on some late season success and show ownership that they can lead this group into the future. I think they'll stay competitive for most of the game, depending on if Derrick Henry might be available. If he's out there, then all bets are off the table. Rest him for another week, and I think they take care of business against Houston here anyway, although it could be tighter than they would like it to be. Then in the NFC, in terms of the 1 p.m. kickoffs, we got the Washington football team against the Giants. Really nobody cares about this one outside that stadium. Both coaching staffs seem to be safe for next season, even though it makes much less sense with Big Blue's side. No idea what is going on with Joe Judge. That's the whole post-game interview, the stuff that he's saying, how they're trying to build on something when they really haven't shown anything in terms of growth. I'm going to pick Washington here. They were competitive against Philadelphia and had a real chance of winning that game. while the Giants just got blown up by the Bears, who are probably a bottom 5 team as well themselves. Then we got the Packers at the Lions, another rather meaningless game. I just don't really see Rodgers being out there. I think they'll rest most of the important starters, even though that did come back to haunt them almost a decade now ago. The last time the Giants won the Super Bowl, and they lost as the number 1 seed coming into the divisional round. I don't think they're going to risk it here against the Lions. While Detroit did have one of the worst games last week against the Seahawks, who put a 50-burger on them, and Jordan Love will have a chance to prove to Packers fans that he can be the quarterback of the future if Rodgers decides to leave here. But I kind of like the Lions here, winning that late one, building on that success that they've had in recent weeks, some of the things they've shown under Dan Campbell, that grittiness. I think they just want this game more and will earn this one. And then we got the second pairing of NFC North teams with the Chicago Bears and the Minnesota Vikings. Another rather meaningless one with the Bears regime probably being out the door. Another one where the result won't make much of a difference here, with the Bears regime probably being out the door, with a fairly meaningless end to the season, where they've shown some growth now finally, but who really cares at this point? Well, I think this might be it for Mike Zimmer as well, and that regime that has been there for a long time, just constantly hovering around that 500 mark. With what we've seen recently, especially with Minnesota, coming off an embarrassing loss on Sunday night against the Packers, and Mike Zimmer, after the game, talking about Kellen Mond and how he sees him every day in practice anyway. Like the whole thing, drafting a guy in the 3rd round who has a lot of talent, and you're out there starting Sean Mannion, who really can't do anything against this Packers defense, and you're saying that you want to see more of him instead of Mond. I just don't really get it. So I'm going to go with the Bears here, having a little more to play for maybe. With 25 kickoffs. In the AFC with the Jets at the Bills and the Patriots at the Dolphins. We saw the Jets just now nearly upset the Bucs, and the Bills allowed the Falcons to get back into that game. So there's going to be some fight from Robert Saleh's group. Some of the things that they've shown late in the season. Zach Wilson finally starting to somewhat live up to that number 2 overall status. Some of the plays that he makes, especially as a runner recently. While the Bills, they're kind of up and down on a weekly basis as well, it feels like. But starting to hit the groove a little bit. That big win over the Patriots, where Josh Allen put on that Superman cape. I actually did a breakdown of that on my YouTube channel. I'll link it at the end, and you can check it out afterwards. The Jets may make things more uncomfortable than the Bills would like them to, but in the end, Josh Allen, those receivers, against a depleted secondary, I think they're going to put up some big plays and take care of business here. Which brings us to the Patriots, who have a chance to make up for a late-game fumble by Damien Harris all the way back in Week 1, and they'll be hungry to get revenge here, as well as giving them a chance for that division. While the bubble finally burst for Miami after seeing their 7-game win streak snapped, New England has historically had the issues, however, going to South Beach late in the season, so it'll be interesting how much Brian Flores and that group has to play for. Did you want to see another game out of Tua after a bad showing last week? But some really positive signs before that. I think Flores himself should be safe here. Some of the things that he's shown, how resilient that group was over the second half of the season. So it should be a fun one. I just think the experience in those must-win games, the Patriots will win this one and give themselves a chance here, even though I have the Bills taking care of business, but still a very dangerous 5 seed, of course. And then in the NFC, Panthers and Bucks here first. Panthers obviously knocked out already a couple weeks ago, while the Bucks just lost Antonio Brown just running off the field. No kidding here, I hope he's okay, I hope he gets the support that he needs. But Tampa Bay really needed him. Like with Chris Godwin out for the season, now he's gone. Now you have Mike Evans and some ancillary pieces. It'll be tough for them coming into the playoffs. But for this game, I'm going to pick the Bucks here, just because having Tom Brady, something to play for here, potentially moving up to the number 2 seed, or having to slide down to number 4, and then maybe facing the Rams, who already beat them in the wildcard round. That's not something that they'll be striving for. So give me Tampa Bay here. And then the 2 NFC West matchups between the Seahawks and the Cardinals, and the 49ers and the Rams. Seattle possibly in the last game with Russell Wilson and Pete Carroll can deliver a final hook to the division rival and secure the Cardinals having to go on the road here throughout the playoffs. That offense finally woke up against a fairly well-coached Lions team, especially with the run game really getting going, and Detroit having some size up front. They haven't been horrible against the run, actually, and I think that could give the Cardinals a lot of trouble here. Just a very dangerous spot here for Arizona, coming off that emotional high against the Cowboys, getting that big win. I think the Seahawks may pull the upset here if everybody's locked in and they want to have one last hooray together maybe. So give me Seattle here. I'll have to look what the point spread is in this one, but a money bet line might be something that I'll be looking at, just because the Cardinals will probably be favored at home by 4 or 5 points, would be my guess at least. And then 49ers at Rams. The Niners under Kyle Shanahan have historically had Sean McVay's number, but the Rams also will have plenty to play for depending on that other NFC West game. This is a Matt Stafford statement game, I would say, because a lot of bad mistakes recently that have really piled on, considering he played at an MVP-like level early on in the season. My issue here with the 49ers, on the outside their cornerbacks, they're going to have a lot of issues covering Cooper Kupp, Odell Beckham, Van Jefferson. Those guys should have a solid day, and I think Stafford will be throwing it all over the lot. But the 49ers having that rhythm offensively, the run game that really punished the Rams in the first matchup, when they kind of dominated them on both sides of the ball up front. You've got the defense being opportunistic in those third and long situations. Nick Bosa coming off the edge. He's been playing a defensive player of the year type of level. I think this streak continues and the 49ers take care of business in a spot where they would probably be more desperate since they are fighting for the playoff lives. While for the Rams it's about the division or having to be on the road. And in this scenario they would still be the NFC West champs. And then the last game of this midday window, the Saints at the Falcons. I'm sure Atlanta with nothing to play for would love to still mess it up for New Orleans in a hate-filled rivalry. We saw them show some fight at Buffalo last week, and they get to play host here in a rivalry where they have definitely played their part, like it's been a lot of season splits throughout the years recently, and in a lot of games where it felt like the Saints were the better team coming in, pulling those upsets. We don't really know about the future of Matt Ryan. Will they decide to trade him maybe in the offseason, somebody interested in him? Do they want to bring in somebody new and start this new regime under Arthur Smith? So the motivation level will be interesting coming into this one. Even though that division rivalry, I think both teams will be fired up. I just think the Saints, with Sean Payton, being in this desperate spot and having to take care of business here, will get it done somehow with Taysom Hill and company. And last but not least, I already mentioned how the Chargers and Raiders Sunday Night Cap, how they will likely determine the final playoff seed in the AFC, and that there's this really weird tie scenario where they could both get in if the Jaguars were to beat the Colts. In my projections here, the Colts take care of business, so it's really just the winner of this game who will get in. Either way, LA won the first matchup at home by a couple of touchdowns, I believe, and are coming off a convincing victory against the Broncos, while Vegas pulled off a big victory themselves against a fellow wildcard contender in the Colts at their place to put them in this position. Derek Carr has kind of slowed down recently. He'll be putting it all on the table here, it is a fiery competitor, and the defense has had some good games, especially being opportunistic, not giving up big plays through the air. The issue I see here for Vegas, the Chargers last week showed a lot of fight, stopping the run, showed a lot of improvement in that area where I thought Denver could take some advantage of it and somehow keep this game close. They didn't because it was consistently 2nd and 10, 2nd and 8, something like that. And I don't think the Raiders have the run game to take advantage of that area anyway. So depending on the status of Darren Waller, I don't think they have a major advantage necessarily against this defense at any spot. While the Chargers defense, like I said, they showed me something last week, coming up with big spots in those moments. Similar schemes defensively with a lot of too high looks for both these teams here. So the quarterbacks should be able to get into a rhythm with some shorter completions, not necessarily attack down the field constantly, but find their way into this game. And the Chargers actually struggled against the cover 2 based defense in the Texans a couple of weeks ago. So they could have some trouble here, but I just think the growth that Justin Herbert has shown, being able to be a game manager, take those short completions, and more methodically work their way down the field, along with Keenan Allen now having the matchup advantage, Nate Hobbs being charged for DUI. I don't really want to get into that, and the whole Raiders situation, everything that's happened for them this season. Just on the field in terms of X and O's, he should have a solid matchup in the slot against, I don't even know who the second nickel is. So I think the Chargers win this one and secure that number 7 seed. Which brings us to a playoff picture, and we can look into it. What would the wildcard round look in this case? So we'd have a couple of divisional rematches between the Chargers and the Chiefs, which pumped that shit right into my veins after what I saw a couple of weeks ago. The whole going for 4th down, how it splits the football community somewhat. But just in terms of the watching experience, really cool game. And then the Cardinals at the Rams, which should be a fun one as well. They split the season series, and there's reason to believe in both these teams, depending on what we'll see week 17. Then the Patriots at the Bengals, which I just would love to see. Bill Belichick against what probably is the hottest quarterback in the league right now in Joe Burrow. Jamar Chase against JC Jackson, when those two guys would match up. That would be really fun. Then with the Colts at the Bills, which would be a rematch from last year's wildcard round, where Philip Rivers nearly pulled the upset at Buffalo, and we already saw this game early in the season where the Colts actually blew out the Bills. So this is not a great matchup for them, I would say, even though Josh Allen is starting to look like a true superstar at the position once again. Then we'd have the 49ers at the Cowboys, the classic, going back to the 90s, all those rivalry games that they had in the playoffs. That would be really fun. And finally, the Eagles at the Buccaneers, also a very interesting one, because the Bucs still one of the better run defenses in the league, going up against the Philly run game that has been as hot as anybody's, while the Titans and Packers obviously would have those first round byes. So yeah, this would definitely be a fun result, but there's so many other ways this could play out, and I can't wait to watch these games. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, subscribe to our channel, share with a couple of friends to let them know what the hell might be going on in Week 18, what's on the table. Once again, if you want to see more of my work, head over to my social media channels. Links for that are down below in the description, as well as on the screen here right now. I'll be back next week, depending on how these contests shake out, either with some kind of preview, or I'm also working on an article on the most underappreciated players at every position. That'll come out at some point, either next or probably early in the off-season. We'll have to see what makes sense, but I'll have something out there for you guys. So until then, see you later. Peace!